Hello and welcome once again to this old town. Today we're going to be taking a look at the ghost towns of Weaver and Octave. Right now we're standing in Weaver. Behind me is what used to be the post office. It's amazing that this town was so well populated. But let me go back. In the 1860s, Abraham H. Peoples, lured by the rumors of abundant gold, decided to have a gold expedition into central Arizona. He hired the famed explorer and scout Pauline Weaver to be the guide. Weaver led the Mormon battalion from the Gila River to California in 1846 and 47. The Peoples and Weaver expedition ended up at the base of Rich Hill. One night while they were camped, a stray pack animal ended up on the top of Rich Hill. They sent one of their Mexican workers and hands to go up and retrieve the animal, and in so doing he came upon a bunch of gold nuggets. This led to Rich Hill being the richest placer gold find in the state of Arizona. Once upon a time, there were 1,200 to 1,500 people living in this town. That's really hard to believe because as you look around, there is nothing left now. The town was named Weaverville originally. They put up a bunch of tents, and then eventually the ville got lopped off and it just became known as Weaver. And as the town grew in prosperity, so did its bad reputation. Weaver became known as the town for thieves and murderers. And the law-abiding citizens of Weaver eventually were frightened and decided to move out to the next mining town of Octave. So in 1899, the town was basically abandoned. And we'll take a look at some of Weaver, and then we're going to go on to Octave. So again, here's the post office, and this is where you'd come to get your mail. It's hard to believe. People, I guess, would come in wagons, walk in on horseback to get all their mail from all over. And eventually, as the town kind of closed up, the post office moved over to Octave. I'm going to take a look inside and see if I can see anything through the windows. As you can see, there's been barbed wire put around the building kind of to help preserve it, but as the years go by, this building is slowly deteriorating more and more. All I can see in here is basically some wood and the foundation, and that's probably about it. There's nothing left in here that even indicates that it was anything other than a bunch of rocks and some wood. Well, here's a foundation of a building of some sort or other, and don't know what it was, but I can tell you that there's stairs leading down right here, that maybe this was the backyard, maybe this was a house in the middle of the town. I don't know, but it's sure nice to picture what actually went on here. This building right here was what is known as the Cool House. And what they did was they stored meat in here and anything else that they needed to keep cool. As you can see, the roof is crumbling down. There's wire around to protect it. Again, I don't know who's putting the fences around it, but it's a good thing that they're doing that. I sure wish this was operational because I could use a cold drink just about now. It's plenty hot here in Arizona. Here we are at the Weaver Cemetery. As you can see by the sign, it says Weaver Cemetery restored by Motorola 4x4s. So they probably put the fence around it and kind of preserved the cemetery the way that it used to be. Because of the fact that there were so many thieves and murderers here, there were probably hundreds of people buried in the cemetery. And if you take a look inside, which we're going to do, you'll see a bunch of crosses in the cemetery, but it's all covered over by bushes and cactus and all kinds of flora and fauna. So let's have a look at the crosses in the cemetery. There's a cross and some rocks, and that's all that's left there. You can't even tell whether there's anybody's names etched on the crosses. I doubt it. But there's a bunch of crosses. As if we can get a look through here, you can see there's a few crosses, and the graves are marked by the crosses and the stones. There's one right here. Right here. Well, that's about all that's left here of the cemetery. No identification, just the grave markers and the stones. Seems to be still a lot of mining operations going on around here, but not too much else. This area right here is called the Devil's Nest, and that's about it. That's all that's left that we know of the town of Weaver or Weaverville. And now let's go on over to Octave and see what's left of that. Well, here we are in the town of Octave. As you can see by looking around, there's not much left here. Once upon a time, there was a 40 stamp mill and a cyanide plant, a post office, school, a mercantile, even a stage line. Not anymore. The town, even though there was gold found at Rich Hill in the 1860s, this town didn't start to prosper until the 1890s. And it went along pretty well until the end of World War II, when the town closed down and they tore down the buildings to reduce the taxes. The town of Octave was basically started and named Octave when 8 gentlemen started a company called the Octave Mining Company. And that's when they started mining for gold. And it worked for quite a while. But again, like all ghost towns, there's not too much left. Let's take a look around and see if we can see some of the old buildings, and maybe we can identify some of them. And come on along. Well, here we are at a couple of old buildings, and as I'm walking to it, I can see what once was a kitchen area. Looks like a stove of some sort. So maybe this was a boss's house or a miner's house, but it appears to be somebody's home. Maybe it was even a boarding house. Can't be sure. There's writing on the top here, but it's painted over and etched out, and I can't make it out. There's another building right next to it, and we'll take a stroll over there and see if we can see inside that. From here, it's really collapsed. I don't know, this looks like a couple of rooms. Hard to make out exactly what this was, but again, this might have been somebody's house, and this might even have been like a little development here. If we take a close look, this was right in the middle of the town of Octave, because we have this rock over here that says Octave on it. So there's a couple of bullet holes in there too. People use the rock as target practice, which is pretty stupid, but here we are in Octave. Over here we have what probably once was a big water tank. You can see some pipes out here. There's a pipe in here. It's kind of deep. As you look in it, it's full of garbage now. It was maybe the miners used it to process some of the gold, or maybe it was just used to supply the town with water. Who knows? But it more than likely was a water tank. Well, there's nothing left here but the stone rock walls and the foundation. Don't know what this was, and it does seem a shame, because once people lived here and had thriving lives, and now there's nothing but rubble and debris. Here we are looking at some antique gold processing equipment. This was the church at Octave. It used to have a cross on the top of it, but as you can see, some jerks came by and shot the cross off. But there's a couple of rooms in this church, and it's nice to see that a good part of this is still standing, even though there's nobody here to utilize it. Hey buddy, you think I could get a ride? Here we are walking away from the church, and I'm looking at what appears to be a couple of grave sites. There's 3 of them here. They look like mounds of dirt with rocks on top of them. I don't know if they are graves or not, but it certainly does look like it. Can't be sure. And our show on Octave wouldn't be complete without a visit to the Octave Cemetery. This cemetery has been restored by Lucille Kelly, the Phoenix 4x4s, the Scottsdale 4x Scouters, and the High Country 4-wheelers. Without organizations like this, this area would just be absolutely nothing. Thank goodness that they had the presence and foresight to keep this area preserved. We'll take a look at the cemetery, and you can see all the grave markers, all the crosses, and this cemetery goes quite a ways down. So there's an awful lot of people who were buried here. Over here, straight in front of me, is Rich Hill, the ex-town of Weaver, and there's nothing there. On this side, to my left, there's some little mining activity going on, but that's about it. And from the town of Octave, this is all that's here. I hope you've enjoyed today's show, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks for tuning in from this old town.
this little town would like to take a moment to thank all those in the armed forces for not only preserving, but for protecting our ways of life. Our hearts and our prayers go out to them and their families.